Okay, Chris, we're here. Post debate, first presidential debate between Kamala and Donald Trump. Second debate for Trump. And I'm not going to ask you what he's batting, but first, did you watch the debate?
No. And I have never watched a debate in 40 years doing this unless it was my job to watch the debate and do work on rapid response, or I was in a focus group and watching the dials move. And the reason I don't watch them are professional. As a political consultant, my job is to win campaigns. The way I win campaigns is that voters vote for my candidate. So my transaction isn't what the candidates think. It certainly isn't what the pundits think. It's what voters think. And so if I'm watching the debate, what I will see is that, oh, that makeup looks like shit. I wouldn't have worn that tie. Why did they do that lighting? That's clearly a prep dancer. He's stumbling. Oops, she caught there. She needs to get. I'll do like kind of. It's like if you've ever had the pleasure of watching a sporting event with a professional coach, and they're explaining stuff to you like you've never seen.
Yeah.
And that's, I won't say, but that's kind of what it's like for me. I'm not watching like who's up, who's down, and that shit. And so literally the decision, I kind of watch the giant umbrella thing. A good way to think about a debate is what are voters looking for, and what were they given, and what's the press saying. You could do a lot worse than thinking 180 degrees of conventional wisdom. A lot of times that's not the case. Like the first Biden-Trump debate, Biden was such a meltdown disaster. Everybody said the same thing. But normally they're more even-handed. It's very clear from the clips, the coverage, is that he did not have a good night, and she had a pretty good night.
Let me ask you a question before we get into that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. So you've actually been in a room of a focus group and seen real-time responses of voters, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you know, do voters tend to respond to the visual body language and the visual experience, or the audio, the spoken experience more? Or maybe the same, or maybe not.
Well, that's a really good question, and I had to think about it for a second. And here's kind of a response that will make sense. The actual candidate's body language when they're speaking, not so much. The opponent's reaction, whether they're looking bored, they're looking at their watch, they're laughing, they're picking their nose, whatever the fuck they're doing, that does matter.
Okay.
And
Okay.
people pick up on that. In a bunch of debates I've done, one of the things we've negotiated is no split screen. And simply because if your person always,
How
knows
dare
it-
you use gendered
Yeah,
language,
right,
Chris? We're going to
right.
get fucking canceled.
Right. If this cocksucker, right, it can be that can be cross thing. But if your candidate always knows he might be on screen, she will be paranoid and not work at being on screen, as opposed to like, I'm writing a note, I'm thinking this through, I'm taking a sip of water, and so I would have negotiated. I mean, and some people it doesn't bother them, but I always think that it's like it's bringing the stakes down for the candidate. Because let's face it, sometimes you do have an itchy nose, and if you go like that, you're going to have 100,000 memes about he picked his nose when we were talking about dead soldiers in Iraq.
Right. Or if George Bush is your candidate, you can be like, yeah, that guy did a line before he came out.
Right. And you kind of.
It's funny that. Yeah, it's funny that you talk about the split screen, because I was thinking about this morning, actually. I think the split screen compared to So last night I watched the entire thing because we were looking at the contest that we were running real time,
Yeah.
figuring out what was happening. And leading up to that, I guess it was, and maybe it was NBC that was showing like Donald Trump's previous and Kamala's previous debates, right?
Hmm.
And they played the debate between Hillary. I think it was the first one between Hillary and
Hmm.
Donald Trump. And they even referred to the fact that he was consistently lurking behind her in screen.
Hmm.
And I felt like that actually hurt Hillary. So as I was thinking through it today, just the idea just popped in my head. I think it played to it took that opportunity away from Trump to be a domineering presence out of the picture in the visual. But what you said about reaction, I also did have instinctive reactions to some of the split screen responses between them. So I can see where that would play into it as well.
Yeah, and the debate, I guess, was the second debate or the first debate with Hillary, with Trump lurking
Mm-hmm.
behind her. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that is another of the incredibly fucking stupid things that the Hillary campaign did. Uh, you would never do that because A, it's distracting, and B, it also creates a possibility of an unknown event.
Yeah.
And you want predictability. Because again, it's like it's like watching somebody shoot a 3 foot putt on TV that
Right.
fucking looks easy. I can do that. No, you can't, because if you've ever been there with the lights and the pressure and all the shit crammed in your brain, and it creates a problem. I mean, some
Yeah.
people were very good at it, and even those people made mistakes. I mean, Obama was a terrific debater, and he got his ass kicked by Romney in the first debate. Reagan got his butt kicked by Mondale in their first debate.
Right.
And so even with guys that have elite skill sets, it's very difficult. It's a very difficult thing. And so, like, you want less
Yeah.
distractions. You want, like, you know,
I mean, also the visual of when you saw the Kamala and Trump together, she was diminutive compared to him,
Mhm.
right? So there's a stature differential and stuff. And I felt like that. I was curious, I guess. We've always had tall presidents in this country, at least in the modern era, and probably going back longer than that. Um, Not exactly the case internationally, but actually is a general rule that leaders tend to be quite tall. The Putin might be one of the smallest on the world stage, actually.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but do you think that visual would matter to the electorate as they're watching to see a shorter podium, a shorter candidate? Do you think it matters?
Yeah, it does matter, simply because, for better or worse, and I think it's because we're better or worse, we like big leaders, we like big
Right.
people, and so
Strong.
I
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if a shorter candidate has ever won.
Hmm.
But there's a famous story, but this is kind of, it's not just a TV age thing. Famously, Lincoln was challenged to a duel one time, and Lincoln was what, 6'4".
Yeah.
He was
Yeah. Quite tall.
right, and his opponent that challenged him to a duel was 5'8". And Lincoln said,
Okay.
and because he was challenged, the person challenged gets to pick the weapons, and Lincoln said broadswords. Uh, and so, you know,
Right.
but by the way, I'll do a shameless plug for a book that I read, that if you like politics, it's called The Lincoln Miracle, and it's
Yeah.
about the Republican convention in 1865. And, if you think politics is dirty now, you should have seen it back then.
Yeah, for sure. I think we are overly pessimistic about this era in politics
Yeah,
because we don't have any really understanding of what it was like before.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's interesting. So that's the visual then. So
Mhm.
I think it would be fair to say then that what's the famous quote? If you want to know who won a campaign, watch it on mute, or
Yeah,
who won a
yeah,
debate, watch it on mute,
yeah.
kind of
That's
thing,
that's
right?
always a good thing.
Yeah. So in that way, I didn't watch it on mute.
Might
But
have been better.
it might be fair to say that advantage Trump in that sense. I don't know about the responses actually, because the split screen, uh, you know, in watching it, I can tell you he never looked at her directly.
Right.
At least not that I saw. Gave her some side eyes,
Yeah.
and she certainly got under his skin, and his reactions, they belied his irritation,
Yeah.
right? And I think it might have been you that said it's always dangerous to act as if the other person isn't worth you debating. Like the electorate hates for
Right.
someone to think this isn't worth doing, like you're
Right.
not worth my time.
Right.
So maybe it's, if it, at best it's a wash on the visual. What have you heard on the actual substance of the audio version of it, on the spoken part of it? Advantage whom and why?
I think she had an advantage on the visual. By the way, Trump's hair looked better than I've seen it look forever,
That
right?
is actually true.
Um,
I actually saw it and I was like, I don't think that is a rug. Like,
but
anyway.
but I thought she had a good visual. Her color palette was great. Didn't take away from her
Yeah.
face.
Yeah.
Her
She
makeup,
looked very good. Makeup. Yeah.
and she was, and I think what she did, especially compared to Trump or Biden, she didn't look fucking 9,000 years old, and she looked
She looked
vibrant.
so youthful and vigorous. Oh my
Right,
God.
right. And she what 60? Is she what
Yeah.
59? But yeah, but she, I thought she kind of won that. Um,
Yeah.
and her, when she's not doing that weird cackle thing, her voice is quite pleasant.
Yeah.
She's got a nice cadence, but I thought visually she kind of came across really well.
Yeah.
He didn't come across bad, but I thought that like it was a nice contrast. It was like, oh my God, somebody that doesn't,
It's funny that you say that. This would be a time for me to say something that she said that I think highlights exactly what you're talking about. And I think it might be actually the key to what happened. He tried to turn her into Joe Biden, and
Mhm.
she said explicitly, I am not Joe Biden, nor am I Donald Trump. And I think that's what most people want to vote for.
Yep.
Neither one of those two people. And I thought, oh shit, that specific statement is exactly what is appealing about you in this race, is that you're neither of them. In a normal version of our politics before, I actually don't think Kamala would ever become president.
Mm-mm.
But every election is a comparison. And I think right now she's the best. She portrayed herself as the best alternative to what nobody wants. Or she's
Yeah.
the only alternative. She is
Yeah.
the alternative.
And being an accidental president doesn't mean anything. I mean, Theodore Roosevelt was an
Teddy
accidental
Rose,
president.
yeah, exactly.
On the other
100%.
hand, Andrew Johnson was also an accidental president. He was a fucking disaster.
Yeah.
After Lincoln got shot, and actually he
Right.
showed up. Apparently, Johnson showed up so drunk at the second inaugural he couldn't even speak. They just kind of kept him there, and he passed out.
Wow,
He got impeached, and he was not a good person, as they say. But no, but I think that was good. I think substantively, and I did kind of quickly read through the transcripts prior to the call. He didn't. I don't know if he ever said her name, and there are only one or two cases that I saw really quickly where he said Biden's name. I mean,
Sure.
I would have been saying Harris, Biden, Biden, Harris, like it was saying L.A. Dodgers. I mean, it would have been that
Right.
kind of thing. I mean, I would
Right.
not have referred to her otherwise as anything but Biden Harris. I would have made
Right.
it a noun. I would have made it a Biden Harris thing, a two-headed
Yeah.
beast. But on the substance stuff, and this is my super unprofessional thing, but I have a couple normie friends that kind of watch the thing casually, and they're not real political. And I asked them what they thought, and they said, "Well, he was horrible, but we kind of knew that, but I don't know any more about her. She ducked a lot of questions." And I thought, Okay. And again, this was, this is 5 people I texted. So it's,
Right.
maybe they're
But
telling me
was
what I
it
want to hear.
true of all? Was it true of all five? All five kind of had the same
All
response.
versions of that. All of them thought he was
Yeah.
terrible, but they were all
Right.
kind of like, well, we know he's terrible and he's getting worse, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But they were still kind of, she didn't complete the sale. It wasn't like she killed him. And it kind of goes back to what we talked about our last podcast. So go back and watch our last podcast. The that you win or lose a debate based upon what you were trying to accomplish.
Hmm.
I think, and I still think, that her attacking Trump is fucking stupid. And you can tell it's stupid by all the cable and Twitter cheerleaders that you wouldn't have walk your dog or eat your cat, as the case may be. Cheerleading her. Oh, she took Trump on. This election isn't about Donald Trump. This is about her.
Hmm.
Do we have confidence in her? Do we think, I've seen ads, do we think she's a crazy 2019, 2020 liberal? Is she this cackling idiot? Or is she a prosecutor who worked at McDonald's who seems to know what she's doing here? Like
Mm-hmm.
which, sooner or later, undecideds are going to come down there and they're going to make that choice. So if I had been advising her, Trump was going to do his, and again, I think her baiting him and him taking the bait was pretty funny. And I think it was a good tactic, obviously. Um, and by the way, he could have destroyed her by saying, play that with somebody else who hasn't been around the block. I'm not taking that bait. It would have been a really tough body blow for her. But I
Yeah.
would have just talked about myself as a prosecutor, as vice president. This is what I think. Um, she kind of ducked the question on abortion, which was obvious to the 2 women I talked to. But they also had no fucking idea what his answer on abortion was. It was this convoluted weirdo thing.
Are you talking about she ducked the question about how long should
Yeah,
a woman be, like how
yeah,
far into a
yeah,
pregnancy? Yeah, I noticed that she didn't directly answer
yeah,
that, but I feel like, well, I generally, Donald Trump is full of shit when he says everybody wanted is like,
yeah,
first of
yeah,
all, no, not everybody wanted it to
yeah.
go back to the states, right? Every legal scholar, every Democrat is like, what the hell are you talking about? But to the people who care about it, that remember Roe v. Wade, because I think there are actually going to be a cohort of Gen Z voters who I don't even remember the first Trump presidency. They don't even
Right,
know what Roe v. Wade is, right?
right.
But to the voters who are maybe the most undecided in the camp that care about abortion, they remember Roe v. Wade had kind of very specific and had been adjudicated multiple times since it had been done, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of laid out a groundwork for when is it viable, when beyond viability, the life of the mother, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed that she ducked it, but she did say, I believe in Roe v. Wade. So to
Right.
me,
Well, right.
again, sometimes you have to decode the language, which is annoying. But to me, it was a political answer way of saying, like, I don't need to give a specific thing where this guy's going to beat me up if I give him a soundbite. I can just say, I believe in Roe v. Wade. I want to codify it. I want to bring it back. And I think what is important, again, because everything is a comparison, when you compare that to the other person who sounds unhinged and says they can abort a baby after it's born, you're
Yeah,
like, the fuck is this guy talking about?
yeah.
Like, and
Mhm.
so I feel like she did duck some things, but I felt like she didn't duck it. I felt like she gave a political answer, which can
Yeah.
annoy people. You know what I
Well,
mean?
and that's kind of, again, my 5-person focus group. But you raise a really good, accurate point. That's if we want to, let's take a little sidebar into the history of abortion politics. So Roe v. Wade, and I think most legal scholars thought it was an awful decision, but they were all for it. And it also made the United States fairly unique in that abortion wasn't settled legislatively. It was settled judiciously. It was settled by 12 white dudes in robes. Um, So flash forward to 1989. There's the Webster decision, which is a kind of put Roe in question. And then comes Casey versus Planned Parenthood. It's a Pennsylvania case. It's worth looking up. Bob Casey was the pro-life Democratic senator of Pennsylvania who restricted abortion. His son is the current U.S. senator who is pro-choice, by the way. And Planned Parenthood sued Bob Casey, and it went to the Supreme Court, all the way to the Supreme Court. At that point, Republicans were getting the shit kicked out of them on abortion. And all of a sudden, all these Republicans were becoming pro-choice all of a sudden because it was something as a Republican reflexively you didn't think about. You were the pro-life party, they were the pro-choice party. But all of a sudden, and because you had Roe, you kind of got, you got a hall pass for that, no matter what side of it we're on. So Planned Parenthood Casey comes out, and it was literally a legal case that was decided by polling. That the case was the Pennsylvania law, Casey, was framed on a series of polls. And basically they polled Pennsylvanians and they said, and again, this is all kind of like, this goes into the category, I was there, I watched it happen, but I can't prove it. But basically there was polling and said, these are the reasonable restrictions that people think for abortion, and these are the rights that you have under this, whether you agree with that or not. It went to the court, and the court went, sure, we'll do this, because everybody knew every piece of the bill was like an 80-20 fucking question, that like nobody reasonable was going to be on the other side of it, and that was the law. But what we knew from that and all the research we did going into that, if you are pro-life, and you can always tell this is the kind of the secret handshake, if you are pro-life, you talk about specifics. If you are pro-choice, you talk about ideology, general values. You take the 30,000. So for her to say Roe v. Wade tells everybody where she is on it, whether she is there or not, or whether. But if you're going to argue specifics, voters instinctively know that you are coming from the pro-life end, and that's kind of hardwired into our politics, because if you say it's between a woman and her doctor, you know you're pro-choice, but if you say, well, it's between a family and their doctor, but on third trimester for like partial birth, you're pro-life, and that's kind of been codified in on this thing. What happened after Casey versus Planned Parenthood, it was like the old Cold War theory of mutually assured destruction. Both parties could destroy each other on the issue. And so literally it was off the table, for, almost 40 years. And so it's really interesting to see it come back into play. And I think it was decisive in 2018 and the Republicans getting crushed, and then their underperformance in 20.
So one of our questions in the contest last night was, how many times would Kamala mention abortion, right to choose, or IVF? And she did it 7 times. Granted, that was actually under the line that we set. I thought it would be more.
Yeah, me too.
I felt like they actually, one reason it may not have been more, by the way, is that section of the debate actually was pretty long and quite substantive. And whether or not she would have done more if it hadn't been, I don't know. But I do felt like by the time they made it through that, if you care at all about a woman's right to choose, you already know who you're going to vote for. And the person who says, and it's interesting because he also is very wish-washy about this. Like the same argument that she's flip-flopped on fracking. Okay, I would say she's flip-flopped on fracking over the last 4 years. I would say he's flip-flopped on abortion 5 times in the last week. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I'm going to vote because in Florida, because I think 6 weeks isn't long enough. I'm personally for exceptions, but I would, And the motto is, well, J.D. Vance said you wouldn't sign a national ban. I didn't speak to J.D. Vance. But it's like, this guy, it's the
Yeah.
same thing, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like by the time you made it to that.
And to voters, that says Trump is pro-life. He's not pro-choice. That's
Politically, at least.
Yeah. That's what I mean. But that's kind of like, that's the body language. If you have to say, well, it's kind of this or kind of that. And by the way, what was really interesting too was that the Northam, the North. So when Trump was talking about the governor, he was talking
Virginia,
about it was Virginia, not West Virginia, and Northam, who is this, I think he was a pediatrician, who, when there essentially was a legislative piece that was introduced that was like literally it was this 11-month, 29-day abortion bill that didn't pass that, but he got asked about it, and Northam gives this really kind of convoluted answer, which you can find online. It's pretty easy. That he pretty much says, well, yeah, we can kind of, you kind of, and it's so convoluted. I mean, but that's what he's talking about, and it's kind of to be in a big debate and reference. By the way, Northam is most famous for his 1984 college yearbook. He was in blackface. And
was he with what's his face from Canada? Were they schoolmates?
Well, it's
Justin Trudeau.
You can also find it. You go Governor Northam blackface because this is 1984. In 1983, Virginia elected the first black governor. So this isn't fucking 1884 or 1984.
Right.
This is kind of a contemporary thing. And he's in a picture. He's in blackface, and the person next to him is in a Klan outfit.
Oh my God.
Okay. I'll send it to you after this. And it's like, and his defense was, I'm not sure if I was the guy in blackface or I was the guy in the Klan hood. And, the idea that he didn't get impeached and thrown out or resigned, he just kind of toughed it out. And did a kind of a lot of groveling, but it's a really fascinating piece. The other great piece, I don't know why I'm going to be obsessed by this guy again. He also used to dress up like Michael Jackson.
Northam did.
Yeah. And
interesting.
At his press, blackface, Michael Jackson blackface.
Yeah.
And some reporter said, can you moon dance? And he said, yeah. And they said, can you still do it? He goes, I think so. And he starts to go to like do the moon dance, and his wife jumps in and she goes, no. I mean, it's like a Saturday Night Live bit. But that was the
personally
governor.
Though, I actually have no problem with him. Listen, I think if you are part of a joke that is making light of the Klan in Virginia, that's a really bad look. But if anybody remembers, Ted Danson showed up in blackface at I want to say it was a Shriners roast of Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah.
And it hurt his career for about a decade and a half.
Yeah.
But what people don't know is that he had dated Whoopi Goldberg. They were very close friends, and she thought it was fucking funny. And so this like idea that things are taboo just on their face, I don't, pun intended, I don't know that that's actually true. Like, if you're a fan of Michael Jackson, and he must be because he was about to moonwalk, to me, that actually softens the idea that he dressed in blackface as Michael Jackson, because this guy is a fan of Michael Jackson. You know what I mean? It just, to me, it's, I mean, it's not good for a politician to do that shit while in office, but if you did that when you were in your 20s and you dressed up like Michael Jackson, okay.
Honestly, I mean, I did some stupid fucking shit in my time, but like, blackface was never one of them, and a Klan hood was never one of them. And it's like,
right.
And again, I mean,
the real question somebody has to ask is, where did you get the Klan outfit? That's the question.
Right?
That's the question.
The picture looks like a real Klan. It wasn't like, like a pillow. It wasn't two people jerking off with a pillowcase on and fucking around drunk.
Yeah.
This was like it was a costume party. And they went to a costume party dressed as like the Klan and somebody was going to lynch. I mean, you kind of go like,
That's
Anyway,
insane.
but anyway, that's we're getting off topic. But anyway, but that's what he's talking about. But the idea that you would be in a major debate, and you're talking about, Gen Z doesn't remember Roe, that like as he, you know, I was on Twitter and I saw that go past, and I'm like, wait a minute, I know this. I do this for a fucking living, and I had to search my brain, and the
Yeah.
idea that anybody would know the reference. It was like, the other thing in what struck out at me is in the beginning of the debate, you know, um, both Harris and Trump talking about fucking Wharton. Fuck, fuck both of you. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, my cost of housing, my rent's going up 24% in the past year. But Wharton says,
Yeah.
fuck the UAP, fuck Wharton.
Right, right,
It's like,
right.
but it was such an
I,
obscure thing.
even worse than Wharton for Kamala was talking about Goldman Sachs.
Yeah,
You know
right.
what I mean? Like Goldman Sachs has said his plan and my plan's better. It's like, I think that's the piece that has the highest potential of hurting her, is not the unknown. We don't know what she stands for. Listen, everybody knows what a politician stands for. They stand for themselves, right? Like, it doesn't go any deeper than that. But the problem is she fits the stereotype of this elitist democratic, like coastal elite snob. And to reiterate it or to lean into it as Goldman and Wharton, I mean, she could have used Wharton to hammer him, maybe, but why even go there, right? Like, if she had framed it differently as, my opponent loves to talk about his experience at Wharton, however, you know what I mean, like something like that, but tie him to Wharton. Don't do it yourself.
And I have to believe, I can't believe anybody was that fucking stupid to do that, because, like, if you are a normal person, I want to hear that your economic experience is based on working at McDonald's, not some fucking corporate thief at fucking Goldman who would who
Oh,
would
that's so smart.
who would
That's
pull
so
the fuck
true.
who would who would, if they thought they could sell your liver in four toes, they would do it.
Yeah.
But like the
Yeah.
McDonald's thing, I
Yeah.
worked at McDonald's. I know how to, like, I get that.
Totally.
But like, but
Yeah.
like, let's talk about an Ivy League school that, like, you and
Yeah.
your kids
Nobody
will
gives a shit
never
what those
fucking
guys say.
sniff,
Exactly.
and the guys that are going to
That's
fuck
really
your country.
smart.
But
That's really
and
smart,
so,
Chris. I mean, to be able to say, I can only imagine how much easier it would have been for my mother to buy our first house with a tax rebate or whatever from the government. We wouldn't have had to live in an apartment for X number of
yeah,
years like we had to if
right,
the government had helped us like I want to help you, right?
right. And so, so going back to my original premise is that I think from what I'm reading, from, again, a quick look at the transcripts, she won the debate, but did it help her? And
Oh, that's interesting.
I think that she needed to fill in the blanks. Filling in the blanks with McDonald's and prosecutor helped her. Saying Wharton and Goldman Sachs, fuck you, and you're just like them, and you might be crazy liberal. And again, I think it was it looks like a bad debate for Trump. I think the more,
Yeah.
but it may not have been. It was a bad debate for Trump. It may not have been a good debate for her. I mean, it was
Yeah.
better than Trump, but did it help her?
Yeah, I mean, let me ask you a question. Do you think some of that depends on the framing? I mean, I think I know your answer to this, but my assumption is that a lot of this depends on the framing that people go into things already believing or wanting to believe, right? So if you are looking for a reason not to vote for Trump, when he says they're murdering, they're aborting babies after birth,
Mm-hmm.
and he says they're eating family pets in Springfield, Ohio, which, by the way, I heard there's so many great memes about RFK being in Springfield, Ohio.
So good.
And when he won't say, I want Ukraine to win, like, when he sounds deranged, you're giving me an excuse to do what I'm already inclined to do, right?
Yeah.
And if you're already inclined to believe that two things are equal, derangement and kind of like your typical elitist politician, if you believe those two things are equal, then I don't think she could really do much to sway you anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that there was an interesting, in the New York Times poll earlier this week, I think it was, might have been on Monday. 65% of voters said they want to change from Biden. They want to change from the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
It also said in that they see Trump as the change, her as not the change. She literally doubled down on "I'm not changed" by the Goldman Sachs and Wharton thing.
Yeah.
But I don't want to. It's like one line. It's but I think that the way to look at a debate, or the way to look at this election, and the way to look at voters is, again, voters ask really simple questions, which is why every Botox broadcaster is wrong about this stuff all the time, because voters ask a really simple question: what's in it for me? Right? I know you're a politician. You're not trustworthy. What's in it for me? I'm going to go to the guy that I think's the person that I think is going to screw me less. They will base that choice on new information. You change your vote, you switch votes, you become something else based on information you did not have. So the question is, what information did voters get last night that they did not have previously? And was it what they care about? And so it's really two levels. What's new? What do I care about, and what's new? Which is why, by the way, it's like we've got an entire economy built on product advertising saying new and improved and sale. Fuck. Right? I mean, that's kind of the big itch. And so literally, if you're a politician, your version of new and improved and or sale, it's, what do I care about? And what's the new information? And, and I think both of them failed that, but I think, she did well. I don't think she did what she needed to do. But, the question is going to become, is that Trump's campaign now, which I thought was really good. Then at her convention, and the week after was pure fucking chaos. And I thought in the past week, 10 days, they pulled it back. And I thought it was making sense again. Is this going to be another 2-3 weeks of chaos with Corey Lewandowski running around doing fucking crazy shit, and, and people undermining, La Savita and Wiles and Fabrizio? I mean, that's a real question. And if that becomes fatal.
It's funny that you say, people want change. I thought of you last night after the debate. I was reading on Twitter, and some Politico wrote, she succeeded in making it seem like Trump was the incumbent. And I thought about how many times you've said the race is going to kind of come down to who gets that label affixed to them last and lastingly, right? So,
and that was good. I mean, if she did that, and we shall see, but if she did that, that's what she needed to do. Which is why Trump, the idea he wasn't saying Biden Harris Biden. I would have said, well, you were in the Biden Harris Biden. It's the same thing. I would have done that.
Yeah. I also felt like how we started this, her saying, I'm not Biden, I'm not Trump. Her saying, I represent a new generation of leadership. Her saying, like, we don't want to go back, we want to move forward. Yeah. Those are all ways of saying what you're saying, which is change, right?
Yeah.
I think the question is, when people say they want change, and this is something that I'm, I guess, obsessively curious about human psyche, because when people say change could be another depression. It could be a world war. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be positive change, right?
Yeah.
So when you have an agent, so what she did is she actually kind of helped his argument of being a change agent by saying he's an agent of chaos.
Right.
Chaos will create change for sure. may not be for the better. Are people nihilistic now? Do they just want anything? Do they want to burn everything?
Yes.
And start over?
Yes. And
well, in that case, it's his race to lose then, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what's driving him. And because one of the questions that we ask, do you think that the United States will be better for your kids than it was for you? And there's like an 80-year thing where people say yes, and they haven't said that, I think, since 2008. I think since 2008, since we had open change. I could be wrong about that, but that is a real indicator. And and again, I mean, taking my non-consultant hat on, I think that's largely bullshit. And people, I think, are driven by both partisanship, that when your party's not in power, everything is doom and gloom and we're all going to fucking die. And if you look at sheer data about like energy production, we produce more oil than Saudis right now, than Saudi Arabia right now, and there's all kinds of health things, and I mean, the United States has a tremendous amount of problems. But could we go to our Haitians a little bit, our cat-eating Haitians? By the way, there actually is apparently personal information. I actually have third cousins in Haiti.
Yeah, awesome. I have no idea that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And simply because part of the family, kind of fucked their way across the Atlantic and fucked their way across the Eastern Seaboard. And so I actually have, when you kind of do this kind of, 23andMe and this DNA stuff, I come up. So I'm speaking for my people.
You're wandering into a blackface moment, Chris. Warning.
Right. But apparently there is a Haitian holiday called Renovo or something.
Okay.
And in the sticks, in like the kind of the hillbillies of Haiti, they will eat cats because they will. In China they will eat dog. I mean, but when you look at Haitians in the United States, and I think there might have been a Frontline or a documentary about these immigrant communities, and that they're great. And people, I think there was an interview with a guy that runs a warehouse or a factory, and he says, no, this is great. He said they show up on time, they're not fucking drunk, they're not, people are complaining about the housing cost, and it was like, when the cost of your house goes up, that is a good thing,
Mm-hmm.
And
for you, maybe not the next generation.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is the trap. The perceived largest wealth creator for people is their home. However, that can become prohibitive to future generations. Right.
Yeah. No,
it's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, every once in a while I will go on Zillow and look at. I have this kind of death wish to look at properties that I almost bought. And I go back and look at properties that I could have bought in Hoboken and San Diego in 1981, and I want to fucking kill myself.
Oh my
God. Buying it.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
The Punchbowl News had some really great coverage today. I actually, I dropped it in our chat on this recording, and I'll include it in our newsletter. They have some reporting on the congressional leadership PAC, and they also have a reporting on the National Republican Senate campaign committee, really detailed on the Senate committee on their kind of like digital report card on their digital fundraising. But I wanted to run through.
Sure.
There's some interesting races that the congressional leadership PAC for the House is spending on. And even though Mike Johnson said recently he thinks they're going to run the table, they're actually spending. So one of them was Alaska. So they're dedicating a good amount of money to beat Mary Peltola in Alaska, which should be a Trump. It is a Trump district, right? It voted for Trump.
Yeah.
They're also going against several challengers for David Valadao in the California's 22nd. Do you see where, from your vantage point, are there actually are things swinging at the House level that may disrupt the leadership, may change leadership?
No, I think that literally all these races, it's more like a politics is local. And I think more than any other cycle in my memory, now all could change. I mean, we saw what happened with, Biden dragging down the ticket, and that was something of a surprise. But all that could change. But I think more than any other cycle, maybe since the 80s, maybe the early 90s, is that these campaigns they're not nationalized, they're really local. And so like tactics and strategy and advertising and all that shit really matters. And you see candidates like, I will take what should have been a pickup in the Senate committee, or was supposed to be a key pickup in Nevada, Sam Brown against Jackie Rosen. She's clocking him. She's clocking him. He's got a dysfunctional campaign, apparently. And her campaign has just been, playing small ball, hitting singles and doubles for the past 9 months. Arizona is another thing. It's that like Arizona could still be should be a Republican state, but everybody knows that Carrie Lake's fucking crazy, and so she's taken. But that's not a Trump Harris thing. That's a Carrie Lake thing, and that's a Jackie Rosen thing.
So you brought up Senate as well with Rosen in Nevada. I went to, over the weekend, I went to a Colin Alred event. Actually, had a long conversation. We may be written up in the New Yorker. I was having a conversation and somebody overheard my conversation. Come to find out, she's a reporter and she started taking notes. So apparently, Colin Alred, he was speaking. They say they're within the margin of error. I've looked at some polling. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. In speaking to people, they asked me what I thought. I feel very. I think Texas is shifting purple. I think it's going to be very hard to unseat Ted Cruz. But I'm curious what your perspective. And also, I read an article that many people are a little perturbed with Colin Alred's strategy. He's kind of been flying under the radar. He hasn't been like over the top in his campaigning. A, is that a mistake to campaign the way he's campaigning? Is he making a strategic mistake? And B, do you actually think he has a chance of unseating Cruz?
Yeah, I think he's got a chance. B, I think he has the right strategy of running below the radar on it. Because what happens is that if he runs above the radar, the danger is he nationalizes the race, and that's not a good thing. So, quick story in 2020, right? No, 2018, 2020. Fuck.
Beto O'Rourke?
No, in Florida, Marco Rubio against
was it the woman that was the sheriff?
Yeah. Who by the way, I thought should have been the VP candidate. Val Demings.
You've talked glowingly of her before.
I'm a big Val Demings fan. Val Demings had Rubio, I won't say on the ropes, but late summer, he kind of had him in a dead heat, and what she was going after him on was missed votes, not showing up for work, not being there for Florida. And it was this really interesting hyperlocal campaign. The National Democrats, in all their fucking wisdom, decided to go in and make the whole race about national stuff. And so in a national environment, it's a red fucking state. And so I think Allred's doing the smart thing, being below the radar and making it about Texas stuff and local stuff. I did see a Cruz spot that was very good, where Allred was saying, we're going to tear down the wall, and my generation is going to be the first generation, and we're going to tear down that wall. And he said, took me out of context, And apparently the Cruz people were waiting for him to say it took me out of context because they said, here's the context. And the whole bite is fucking worse than the spot bite.
Oh,
And,
interesting.
but no, I think he's running a good campaign. Could he beat Cruz? Yeah. And by the way, Cruz is way below the radar too.
Yeah. True.
I mean,
The funny thing is, as you mentioned this, I actually think there's a structural benefit for Allred that did not exist for O'Rourke. O'Rourke is a native son of like El Paso.
yeah.
Far the fuck out, right? Allred is a native son of Texas, but also a central Texas. I think he has more pull and will draw more numbers from Dallas, Austin, San Antonio. He is a central Texas where the population is. So, he doesn't need to play a national campaign for name recognition. He doesn't need to play up all of that because he has the grassroots in the very populous, in the most populous part of the state. So I think there's a structural benefit there. All right. Any other interesting things happening, either that we didn't talk about in the debate or with other races that are happening? We're kind of in the final sprint. I mean, I know we still have the October surprise that will happen, but
yeah, I think that, in terms of like what happens with the debate, look at the next series of polls. And if she's moved, or if she's not only moved, I think it's really hard to move, but if she's moved or at the minimum stopped her downward trend, then she won the debate and she had a successful debate. Well, she won the debate. Did she have a successful debate? It's two different questions.
Right.
You'll know that. If she has moved, or if she hasn't, then she did not fill in the blanks on her, and people went back to the default settings. Which may seem strange, but that's kind of the way it works.
Yeah, this raises an important question. Do you think there will be a second debate between them?
No.
I don't think so either.
No, I mean, I don't think either one wants a second debate.
I agree.
Because she won't have a better performance in the second debate.
Right.
He may have a worse performance, and
right.
It's like the risk reward level on both is too high. I mean, if I were her, I'd be already cutting spots from the debate. I don't know if they've got permission. Usually what happens in campaigns, you say, well, you can't use any of this in spots. And that doesn't.
I've heard that she already released I have a concept of a plan spot. I heard that she already.
Okay, then they didn't negotiate that. Sometimes that is. If not, your super PAC can do it. But like if I were
maybe
her,
that's what it was.
Yeah,
maybe that's.
But if I were her or her side, I would be pushing that shit out. And and what I would do is I would start with whatever her great clip from the debate is, and the announcer says that's Kamala Harris, worked at McDonald's, prosecutor, or put people behind. Blah, 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 blah. I mean that's what I would frame the debate as part of her bio. But that's me.
So she mentioned abortion 7 times. He mentioned the border, immigration, or illegal immigrants 14 times. Now, in all of the contest questions that we ran, it had to be specific. It couldn't just be, look at what they're doing to our country. These people are coming over or whatever. It had to be the specific wording. So it was way more for that. It was also more for her. She mentioned women's health care. She didn't say the word abortion or whatever. So they did mention it more, but they just didn't use the wording. But he hammered way more on some of the things that we had for him. 14 times for border, 9 times for inflation. Where compared to her, she just didn't have as many issues. She didn't hit January 6th and democracy as much as we thought she would.
Yeah.
So I felt like there was a big missed opportunity for her. She forgot to say that he invited the Taliban to Camp David on September 11th. She left the September 11th part out. Missed opportunity. And she also, I thought it was a big missed opportunity. He was talking about the January 6th, and they've weaponized the DOJ. They did bring up that he threatened to imprison people. She didn't say that he also floated the idea of executing a former general, Mark Milley, for being unfaithful to him.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a missed opportunity. Anything you could frame negatively for him, I thought he missed an opportunity to, when she was talking about border integrity of Ukraine, to say, well, what about our border?
Yeah.
Have you seen anything that the last thing to wrap it up, anything that they missed a huge specific moment other than framing themselves differently?
No, I mean, I think that they missed opportunities. They stumbled. I think that the two biggest misses for both of them is that he did not hammer away at Biden, Harris, Biden, and she did not fill in biographical stuff. And she was trying to point him and counterpoint him and get under his skin. And frankly, kind of high school shit, when I think her job was to fill in the blanks about herself, because that's the question everybody has. Who is she? We know who he is. We know he's an asshole. We know he's a lout. We know he's a liar. We know he's, whatever the litany of things they're going to say about him, that's what they'll say. But fill in the blanks. But so last thing, if I can have, so this is September.
Please.
This is September 11th, and I trash politicians all the time. Probably my favorite client and one of my favorite people was the governor of New York on 9/11, George Pataki. And you really, you always have the thing like, what would happen in a crisis? Do we have the leaders that would stand up and do the right thing? And like literally, I got to watch him in real time. Be stoic and selfless and supportive. And Giuliani was the front guy, but everything that was happening behind the scenes, all the recovery, all the state resources, all the connections to the federal government, that was all Pataki. And that was all Pataki's people that were just had their heads down and were grinding the entire time. The other thing that he did, which isn't known, and for good reason, I don't think he missed a funeral of anybody that died in there. And he would just not just show up, but somebody would reach out to the family and say the governor wants to pay his respects. There was never any press. There was never any, and he would just show up. To the point when, if you were walking down the street with Pataki, and Pataki's like 6'5", he's huge, but when you were walking down the street with Pataki, it was almost impossible for somebody not to come up, and even to this day, to come up and say, I was there at Louis Giordano's funeral when you were there, and it meant a lot to everybody there. And it was like, it happens all the time. And it's really, along with the tragedy of 9/11, I also think with Pataki, you really got to see what, political leadership should look like. So.
Yeah. Well said, Chris. Well said, Chris. As much as we make a game about it, literally, and acknowledge that politicians piss us off and may not always feel like they have our interests at heart, I think it's far easier to make it through life to give them the benefit of the doubt, because they will impress you oftentimes in moments like that. Thanks for saying that.
It was the most selfless thing I saw in politics, and it wasn't like a moment. It was,
it was like sustained
6 years. Yeah. It was nonstop. Wow. Even trying to build the 9/11 memorial and all that. It's like people wanted fucking crazy shit. But when you look at, if you've never been to the 9/11 memorial in New York, it is very similar to the Vietnam Wall. Where there is this kind of oppression that comes over you, and the weight of it is there, and it's really remarkable. But anyway. That's what I got.
The way the waterfalls are sunken in the
Yeah.
footprint of the towers,
Yeah.
it's funny that you say it, the weight of it, because it is almost like a force of gravity pulling you
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
You feel it because of the design of it as well, I
Yeah.
think.
And the rush of the water kind of creates this white noise for you.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah,
really, but it's, but like that and Vietnam Veterans Memorial are just two incredibly
right,
moving monuments.
yeah,
Anyway, all right, I'm going to jump.
yeah. It was great talking to you. Have a good one.
Thanks.
All right, everyone. That is another episode. As we ended there, it is September 11th. And I think Chris said it remarkably and really tied together what we're doing here and what we're not doing here. Obviously, what we're doing here is creating a game experience for civic engagement, political engagement. And hopefully, we're doing it in a way that's fun and kind of, to steal a phrase from the British, takes a piss out of politicians. And but hopefully we don't do it in a cynical way. And I hope love any feedback from our audience. I hope you don't feel any cynicism coming from this podcast. Although I think what has Chris said is cynically professional, professionally cynical, maybe. Um, but I think underlying that, as Chris just showed, is a willingness to constantly be impressed, or have your faith, reasserted when people step up. And I think our country, we've always stepped up when we need to. And I think if I was going to say anything, the hope of this podcast and of Fantasy Elect is that we don't step up just when it's a moment of crisis, but we actually step up and talk to each other on a daily basis, regardless of what side of some political made up division there is, so that we can, continue to improve our country. A little, not a rant, not a lecture, but just something to remember on this day. And again, please, I guess I have to say it, like, subscribe, share, and again, give us your comments, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.